Hello everyone, welcome back to the Blind Press YouTube channel and the second review for the second episode of Rings of Power. And this is titled Adrift. And oh boy, are we adrift in some bullshit. Holy crap. We've got some nonsense going on here. So we ended the last episode with Galadriel heading off to the Grey Havens, except she decides not to and jumps off the ship. And we also ended the episode with a Comet Man. Yes, a Comet Man has fallen to Middle-earth, ladies and gentlemen. And so we begin this episode with Galadriel swimming back to Middle-earth. Now, I know she's an elf, but really? She's jumped off the ship that's going to the Grey Havens, and she figures she's just gonna swim back to Middle-earth? Okay, sure, okay, cool. So, we have her swimming and swimming and swimming. Now, this episode does a lot of jumping around. Last episode was kind of, we spent a bit of time in each, we spent a fair amount of time in each area, a quarter of the episode or a third of the episode with the elves, third of the episode with the Harfoots, third of the episode with men. Kind of jumping in between the two, but this episode there's a lot of jumping around. So we now are going to Elrond meeting Celebrimbor, the elven smith, because the High King has sent only Elrond to assist this most honorable and, noble and famous of elven smiths. When he asked for a workforce, he's like, no, I can't give you a workforce, but I can give you my half-elven speechwriter. That should be okay for you, right? So, Lord Celebrimbor is, I'm sure, very thrilled for that. And he wants to build a giant tower with a forge that's as hot as a dragon's breath. So we're talking about the building of the tower that forged, all the swords and all that we hear about later, right? Orcrist and Glamdring and all of that, all of that stuff that's where that's where this is coming from. Now, Elrond has, the idea that since we don't have an elfin workforce, have you considered looking outside our race, Lord Celebrimbor? So they go off and we get to meet Durin. We all know about Durin. We've heard about him from The Hobbit. He was part of where Thorin was going, part of, the whole thing about Thorin looking for the Lonely Mountain and all of this stuff. And we hear about Durin also in The Lord of the Rings when we go through the Mines of Moria. Now, as I mentioned last review, the accent anomaly is rather interesting in this show, and it continues with the dwarves. Remember how I said the elves had the very posh accent? The men had the Yorkshire kind of accent. The Harfoots are all Irish. Can you guess what the dwarves are? No, they're not Welsh. They're Scotsmen, of course. All of them. Every single one of the dwarves are Scottish. And of course, Elrond, because Elrond and Durin are apparently good old friends. I don't ever remember hearing of that in The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings, or, I will admit that I haven't been able to read the Silmarillion yet, but from what I've been able to glean, I don't ever remember Elrond and Durin being good buddies, but apparently they're good buddies. But Elrond has been a bad friend, and Durin is very, very mad at Elrond. So Elrond has to take part in the endurance test, and if he fails, then he has to get lost forever from all dwarf lands. And we find out later that this is because Elrond didn't come to his wedding or the birth of his children. Bad friend. Bad friend. But this is, of course, all solved because Elrond wishes to apologize to Durin's family, and Durin's wife will have none of Elrond leaving right away. He must stay for dinner, and of course, friends being friends, everything gets patched up, and Durin brings the idea of working with the elves to build this forge to the king of Moria, or Khazad-dûm, as it's called. And of course the king is like, no, because the elves always want something of us, and we always get fucked, because the elves bad. More racism. Rah! More blatant racism, because subtlety is absolutely unheard of in this show. And then we move on to the men. So, of course, we have, from our last episode, Arondir, one of the watchers of a man village, because these men are descendants from Morgoth, and we all must deal with the horrible things our ancestors did, don't you know? So one of the Arondir and one of the female humans, who's a healer, have gone to investigate why somebody's cow has died, and we have discovered that the whole town where this cow has wandered and grazed is burnt to the ground, and there are giant holes in the earth, and looks like there's been a tunnel dug out. So Arondir follows this tunnel, and he has a big chase through the tunnel, but we don't really see what's chasing him. And of course, the human female has gone back to the village to say, we have to get the hell out of here. Bad shit's coming. And the elves aren't here to protect us anymore. And of course, the town council guy, who's also the innkeeper, is like, no, we don't need the elves. Good riddance to the elves. Nothing's going wrong. Just because you've fallen for the elf, or, everyone knows that she's got the hots for Arondir, and they all hate it, because, racism. So he's basically, tells her, shut up, nothing wrong is gonna happen. Meanwhile, her son is back in their house, and an orc is busting through is coming through the floor, because he, thinking that mice are under the floorboards, and he's getting sick of it, has busted through the floor with a fire poker, and it's not mice, it's an orc. And this is where one of the biggest bullshit things has happened here. So we've got Bronwyn, the female healer here. And I was almost liking her as a character. And then they put her in a fight against an orc. Now, her son tries to help her, kill this orc by using a pulley system type, like using himself as a pulley system with a rope to try and hang this orc. Her son's almost an adult, like he's 16, 17. And he's getting his ass kicked, right? And this chick, she stabs it in the back with shears. Then she stabs it with another blade. And then, somehow, this woman that's shorter than I am, and I'm about 5'6", okay? This woman that's shorter than me manages to chop the head off of a standing orc with an axe. I'm like, no. I'm sorry. No, not possible. And then, of course, she marches into the tavern with the orc's head. If anyone wants to live, come with me and pack your belongings. And it's just like, come on. Really? And of course, this episode, we switch now, of course, to Galadriel. And she's been rescued by a raft full of random humans. And at first they, refused to throw her over or they refused to help her. In fact, they throw her back overboard because some random Leviathan comes and attacks the raft. And basically kills everybody except one person who rescues her on the remaining chunk of raft. And, we continue to get a glimpse into Galadriel as this vengeance-seeking warrior woman who she never was in any of Tolkien's works or in Peter Jackson's movies. And it's just completely not who Galadriel is. And we've got just these and we end the scene with Galadriel having to be rescued by this human again because they're in a storm, and she's lashed herself to the mast, and the mast gets struck by lightning, and somehow she doesn't die by being dragged down into the ocean with the mast, and somehow the human, with no supernatural powers whatsoever, is able to climb down the rigging, get to the mast that's sinking, untie/cut her free, and get her to the surface without both of them drowning. Yay, plot armor! Galadriel must survive! It's bullshit like this. And then we see the Harfoots. We see the Harfoot, Nori, trying to help the Comet Man. And I am leaning more and more towards, I'm kind of at a toss-up here between whether this guy is Gandalf or Sauron. And I think it might be Gandalf, because I think they're trying to show us why Gandalf has such a love for the halflings, as, all the big people of Middle-earth call the hobbits / the Harfoots. I think that this is Gandalf because the Silmarillion says that Gandalf is an avatar. And I think this might be one of his, rebirth moments. It would be interesting to see. And then there's some cloaked figure that rescues Galadriel and her rescuer, and I'm thinking that might be Saruman, but I'm not sure. Or it might be Lord Celeborn, the man who Galadriel takes as her husband. So those are some of my predictions. And now, to quickly, before we end this review, address all the morons online that are calling us Tolkien fans sexist and racist because we don't like this show. Now, that's a bunch of bullshit, and your argument that somebody is anything because they have well thought out opinions on why a show is bad means you have no argument. The minute you start attacking somebody's character when they come at you with opinions on why they don't like a fantasy show, you, person, are the one with the problem. Because Tolkien fans are, I guarantee you, are not sitting here complaining about anything to do with race. And if anything that we're complaining about is to do with looks, it's because Tolkien was incredibly descriptive on the costuming and what his characters wore, even in his prose. So there is no excuse for why characters look wrong. None. And for this whole, oh, you just mad that Galadriel is a super strong woman character. It was fine when Legolas was doing impossible things. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't fine. Like, just because we are Tolkien fans doesn't mean that we love everything that Peter Jackson did. I'm sorry, I was really mad that the Raising of the Shire wasn't included in the Return of the King. I was like, not, we don't love everything that Peter Jackson did, and let me tell you, most of us absolutely hate what he did with The Hobbit. So for you to sit there and use anything to do with Peter Jackson as an argument as to why we should like this show is crap, and shows that you have not actually read any of the Tolkien stuff. So take your racism and your sexism arguments and shove them so far up your ass that you have lost them forever, because they're not arguments. Stay tuned, my friends, for the episode 3 review. Have a fantastic day.